I've empowered myself with the knowledge of how the system actually works, and I've started to accumulate this asset that grows in value more than pretty much anything. I now think, oh my gosh, first of all, let's get everyone on this life raft, because it really does feel like that. But now I'm not as worried about the future. I feel like I don't want to be one of the only ones on that life raft. Like I think that we need to teach people about it, because so many people are getting so frustrated that we're leading to a world of violence and chaos, because we're sowing the seeds of just total revolution and hatred toward one another. So like, I think that Bitcoin is the only way that we build our way into a more peaceful, abundant world. We have to shift out of that. And we have to teach people about it as quickly as possible, because the world that we're headed toward, and if there wasn't Bitcoin, it's like a dark one, I personally think. And with Bitcoin, it's like a huge ray of light saying that there is hope and there is a better path forward. And we as humans can cooperate and work together to build something amazing. It's not going to be perfect. There's still human nature is human nature, but the incentives are realigned to reward goodness again. And that's what I think Bitcoin really does.
Hello, everyone. Today, my guest is someone very, very special to me, Natalie Brunell. Natalie won Emmy Award. She has just published her first book, Bitcoin is for Everyone. Natalie, it's such a pleasure to have you here. I've been waiting for this conversation for so long, and I just cannot believe it that you are here. Thank you so much for finding time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to learn more about you and to see that you're in the space. So thank you for having me.
You've got something in common. Maybe not everyone knows, but I'm Polish. Natalie was born in Poland too. So everything that you are commenting about, the situation that you lived when you were a child and then you moved to United States, how it made you feel and think the way that Bitcoiners do. Something similar is happening to me. I also migrated from Poland a little bit closer. I'm in Spain, but there are so many things that resonate so much. So please tell me the first thing. I know that coming from Poland to the United States, you were a very, very small child. You were very little. Maybe you didn't even understand what was going on around you. So what was the moment that changed the way you started to think about the world that was surrounding you? When was the moment that you thought Bitcoin is something that I really need to dive deep into because it will solve some of the situation that I'm in right now?
Well, first of all, dzień dobry to
Dzień
all of our Polish
dobry!
viewers. It's funny what you said, because a lot of my family's friends, my parents' friends, they fled Poland and they didn't all come to America. We were one of the only families that went to America. A lot of them ended up in the UK. They ended up in Australia, other countries, but it was all for the same reason. There was no opportunity in communism. And a lot has changed. I mean, Poland has really emerged, and my parents still talk to their friends that they grew up with. And some of their friends are actually living a higher quality of life in Poland than most Americans are here in the working class, because the price of everything versus incomes has just gone crazy divergent. So the story is just fascinating in and of itself, because I grew up seeing them work so hard. My parents basically sacrificed everything. They came here without knowing the language. They started over. They were business owners in Poland, and here they came and they started with nothing, and they had to find new careers. So I think I was instilled with the sense of, okay, here you can, if you work hard, you can achieve anything. That's what my mom would always tell me. But I realized something was broken right around the time that I graduated from college, because we had the great financial crisis here in the United States, which I know also impacted other countries, but here it was so bad. My parents lost their house. They had to file for bankruptcy, and I just stared at the situation with this confusion of how could this happen? My parents did everything right. They're such good people. And these bankers in Wall Street, are richer than ever and they get bailed out by the government. And I just felt like the system is so unfair. But I didn't learn about Bitcoin until many years later. I didn't start studying it until about 2017 when I first learned about it. And so it took me a long time to connect the dots to the financial system and to realize that like we live in a very broken system where a few people control the money and print more and more and more and more and more. And it dilutes all of our individual units of currency, whether we're spending in British pounds or euro or dollars, we're losing purchasing power faster and faster. And so I came to the conclusion that there is a hopeful path forward with Bitcoin. And so my passion now is just to teach everybody I can about Bitcoin. But yeah, it all goes back to my roots. And it's my family from Poland that wanted to come here to work hard and to have their kids achieve a better life.
How come that you chose the career to be the journalist? It's not that usual. Yes, you are doing the great job, and you were the investigator. You were doing a lots of different storytelling reports. How come that you changed from having this, I imagine, quite great, stable job in television, and you became the podcaster, which we know it's not that easy. It has its challenges, and to convert it in your professional career ain't that easy. How come that you decided to go all in?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so much there. First of all, I wanted to be a journalist because when I was little, I loved stories. And I was actually confused when I was young. Part of me wanted to be an actress because I grew up on a lot of movies. One thing that people have to understand is when we moved here from Poland, we had something on all the time because my parents, it would help them learn English. So we had the news on, we had TV shows on, we watched movies all the time. So I really grew up in front of a screen, not in a bad way, but like stories all around me, whether that was news or fictional, fairy tales, Disney, all of that. So I just thought, wow, what a cool industry. Like it's an amazing industry. Back then, everyone watched the news. Everyone in the 90s, would sit down. You didn't have the internet, you didn't have your smartphone, and everyone would watch these programs. So I thought it was such a beautiful industry. And I think my mom really wanted me to be a doctor. Polish parents are very much like many other immigrant parents where they want the kids to get a very, very solid degree and go into a stable profession that is associated with financial security. So doctors, lawyers. My mom said, work for the government because the government was so powerful in Poland.
Yeah.
But I had my sights set on storytelling. And my mom was very supportive. And so I went into the industry and I found myself gravitating toward investigative journalism because I think after the financial crisis, I just saw so much corruption. I was like, there's something that's so unfair. And there are a few people who take advantage of others. And that's what I think I saw repeatedly. It was like good people, very similar to my parents, and they were taken advantage of by people in power. And I felt frustrated and I wanted to be a voice for the people. But then when I encountered Bitcoin, like so many people, at first I said, "Oh, this is going to be a scam. It could get hacked. There could be 500 others that it could be replicated." So I had to go on a really big journey, and really the podcast was part of that journey because I tried to report on Bitcoin. I wanted to learn more about it in my news job, and I couldn't. I did like a couple stories here and there, but for the most part, I had other assignments. So I thought, I was talking to some of my mentors and they said, why don't you just do a show start interviewing these people on the show? And I said, okay, I'm just going to do it for fun. And I started to interview people and it found an audience very quickly. I was really surprised that I was reporting on TV and sometimes those stories would only get, I don't know, a couple thousand views. And then my interviews with Bitcoiners would get tens of thousands or 100,000. And I thought, okay, there's something here. I've never been on my own as an entrepreneur. I never even thought that that was a possibility. I always wanted to work for a TV network. So I took a big chance. I didn't know if it would work out, but I decided something in my heart and in my gut is telling me that this is the future, that this is really positive, that this will help people, and the money eventually will come. So I hope that that story actually inspires people because sometimes life takes you in directions that you don't expect. But when your heart is telling you something, and when you find that your skills, like what I was actually good at, which was storytelling and communication, matches what you're actually really passionate about, like go for it because it's worth the risk. And so for me, it's been a great journey and I'm so grateful.
I must admit that you inspired me enormously. I discovered you like, I don't know, 4 years ago or even more. I first saw you on TV. It was like the very short interview. I think it was in CNBC or something. And then I saw you talking about Bitcoin with such a passion. I was
Yeah,
like, wow, who is she? Because
I
I was
know.
already listening to a lot of Michael Saylor now because of my husband. He's working the strategy. So Michael Saylor is like 24/7, it's like
Yeah.
a radio all the time. And then I saw you and was like, wow. And I started to listen to you more and more and more. And then I discovered that you were Polish. It's like, wow, she's Polish too. And then you were the first woman that I saw in the space. And speaking about Bitcoin, then I discovered like more, like Efrat, Efrat is also
Yes.
what well, I am also following her. But this was the story, your story inspired me. Then I saw your interview with your friend when you were speaking about how you went from one conference to another, just sharing
Yes.
the cards and trying to bring someone to podcast. I'm doing the same now. So, I'm
Good.
the first one. I am the first. Yeah, yes. I started just like a few months ago. I went to my first
Oh,
conference in Prague and I started to do the same. And I'm just saying it because I want you to know that you are a huge
love it.
inspiration. I so important. I wouldn't be there. I wouldn't be like thinking of doing this conference, if it was not for you, because of you, because we always think, women, this is something for, the guys, the IT, crypto, cyberpunks. It's not our space. But I see that it's changing and it's all of you. So thank you so much for what you're doing because it's like, it's incredible. It's incredible job.
Oh my gosh, thank that means so much to me. It makes me so happy, and I want other women around the world to be inspired. I mean, if you like Bitcoin, there's some way that you can work in it and contribute. And there's a saying there aren't enough Bitcoin podcasts. We always need more because everyone's different and has their own story to tell. So that makes me very happy. I'm glad you're doing this.
Question about your book. I started to read it. I'm in the half. I didn't manage to read all of it because before the interview, but I started to read it. I and the first chapters. No, I've read a lot of Bitcoin books. As all the Bitcoiners are reading everything, but the first time I'm seeing something explained in such a transparent and easy manner that I'm thinking, okay, if my mother reads this book, she will understand it. If some friend of mine that has no idea about Bitcoin, I'm trying always to explain it. It's like just not getting through. I said, I need to give this person this book because it is written for someone that has never studied economics, that has never studied Bitcoin, and it's just so easy because Bitcoin has like 360 different topics that you can talk about. And then you just concentrate on like the most important ones and you explain it so easily. How did you do it? Just tell us
Well,
the
first of
journey.
all, thank you so much. That was really the goal. So, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you saying that, because my experience with Bitcoin is a lot of people, and myself included when I first started, it seems very intimidating. And a lot of what you learn, it causes you to sort of, challenge what you were taught originally about finances and money and really your understanding of how the world works. So you have to approach it, I think, especially with the average person, really just gently and delicately. I've always been a believer that if you scream at someone and you call them names and you tell them all the reasons they're wrong, you're probably not going to be very effective in sharing your message, right? Like, I think that we have a lot of people who are at different levels of understanding. Maybe they're experts in certain subjects, but everyone's kind of no one has extreme amounts of knowledge about everything. So you have to kind of break it down simply so that you reach the most amount of people. And I wanted to do it in a very positive, uplifting, kind of inclusive way, as opposed to attacking people if they hate Bitcoin or they don't understand the financial system. So I felt like I also gave a lot of the Bitcoin books that I loved and I still love to some of my girlfriends, for example, and they would feel like they're either a little too academic or too technical, and they would put them down and maybe sometimes not finish them. And so I thought, I have to write a book that is really for the average person that's busy with their lives, maybe has a family, a job, and they're stressed out about money and they don't know where to turn for hope. And they need it told to them in a very simple way, a way that they could give to their kid or their grandparent, across the spectrum. And so that was really the genesis of this book. And I had an incredible team around me. I mean, this book would not have been possible without so many people. One in particular I have to share is a woman by the name of Allison Gustafson, who we would sit and just pour over every single word. One of the reasons is because I come from a background of writing scripts, and scripts are very choppy and like short. I mean, if you've seen me on TV, I basically share everything within 2 minutes and then I'm done. And then you can't talk anymore. They go to another story. So for me to be able to write 200 pages, I had to really dig in and look at words and language as a form of currency as well. And Allison is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. And we would go back and forth, and we come from very different backgrounds. We come from very different political, like we have everything kind of different, but we came together and she really helped me craft my language in a way that was effective, but also very simple and very much approachable to everyone. So she was amazing. I had a book agent who believed in this from day one, who was like, this is the book that the world needs. Go for it. We need more women in the space. We need more female authors in Bitcoin. So she was just an incredible amount of inspiration. And then I had people like Jeff Booth, who I would sit with him. I mean, we recorded one of the conversations and I released it as a podcast where I was asking him to explain and re-explain to me inflation versus deflation,
I
like,
see.
do I understand it? I had Lynn read an early copy. I had Michael Saylor read an early copy. So nothing great is done alone. And I just want to say that there were a lot of people who contributed to my journey and made it something that I feel like really is. I mean, you always, when you write something, you always want to tweak it. And I feel like I can find 20 things right now that I would improve about the book, but you work on it for so long, you put it out there, and it's the best that I could possibly give to the world at that time of what I think the introduction to Bitcoin should be.
You have put like in the first 2, 3, or even 4 chapters a lot of emphasis on the problem of the inflation. Why you think inflation is the basic problem that we are facing today, and why is it so important to understand what really Bitcoin is and why we need it finally?
Yeah. So the first half of the book is really about inflation, because it's something that I feel like I never really studied or learned about and I took for granted. So I posted, for example, recently on X, this chart, and it has prices. 30 years ago, what the prices of things were, like a house or a coffee, groceries, and what the average income is to today, and then projecting out 30 years from now. And one thing that you'll notice is, the cost of homes is going like this, but people's income is barely, I mean, it's increasing, but not enough. And we as a society, no matter where we live, we've come to accept that as just the way it is. Prices go up, and it was easier for your grandparents' generation to afford stuff. That's just the way life is. And I think what Bitcoin made me realize is, why does it have to be that way? First of all, why is it that way? What's actually causing it, which I explain in the book? And why does it have to be that way? Why does your money have to lose value in order for society to function? That's like one of the biggest lies that I think we've been told. And so Bitcoin is this introduction via technology of a form of money that's immune to inflation. And when I say inflation, it means the destruction of your purchasing power by adding more units into the system. Bitcoin is immune to that. There will only be 21 million, and it is divisible enough to accommodate a global economy that's connected digitally with billions of people. That amount of money is enough, even though we're told or we're made to think it's not, it is. And it would allow us to, I think, usher in and build the most abundant world that we could ever imagine. And I've said before on shows recently that think of all the amazing things we've created on such imperfect money, on money that's really been corrupted. What would we build on great money, on like true free market, capitalistic, merit based money that no one can manipulate? I can't even imagine. I feel like we would be living in exactly the type of world that I would want, my kids and future kids and future grandkids to grow up in. So I believe in that vision, and that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. Now, the broken money is like, I think, the first problem that exists, and the first problem that nobody understands that this is the problem. Yes, because look at all the young people. I'm looking all around. I think, United States. You mentioned it a lot. I think the same situation we've got here in Spain. That there is a lot of problem with housing. There is a lot of problem for young people to start their families. It's almost impossible. The the subject of saving is like, saving. What is it? I can't even make it until the end of the month. So I wrote some articles about it, but it's like, the message is not getting through. I'm like comparing the numbers because it's mathematics. Yes, look what you could do, what you could save if you put just a little amount of money in Bitcoin, and
Yeah.
what are you saving, or rather, not saving but losing, putting in cash, in dollar, in euro, whatever. But the world today is constructed and it's focused on so much of the consumism. Everyone is like focused on this very short term pleasures, just go to the next vacation, just buy a new phone. You know, how can we change this kind of thinking? Because it's all connected. The way that we think very short term, and the money that is behind that is broken, basically. What can we do, apart from what we're doing already? We're trying to do this podcast and going to conferences to make young people aware that there is the way out of it, because there's so much of desperation. There's some lack of hope everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I think that a lot of people are recognizing the symptoms of the problem. They just don't understand what actually caused the problem. And so then if you don't understand the problem, I think it's hard to appreciate the solution, especially one that feels and seems very risky and volatile. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we have seen the price of things and it's outrageous what's happened, and the average person is not able to keep up, and so I think it's really understandable that people start to feel really frustrated, and when your dollar is losing value or whatever currency you're using, if it's losing value quicker and quicker, that incentivizes you to spend it as fast as possible because it's gonna be worth less a week or a year from now. So it encourages all of that short-term thinking, and that's one thing that I think Bitcoin taught me. It taught me to think differently about time and incentives, which drive a lot, right? And so we are incentivized to, give into things that are more of our sort of like base instincts, I think. And Safedine does a great job writing about this, of just like that fiat mentality. And it's no longer about dropping your time preference and thinking long term about the future. It's really about short term survival. And when you're only thinking about survival, I mentioned this on Preston's show. I think that just it changes your mentality, not just toward yourself, but also the way you treat other people. So for yourself, it makes you feel anxious and worried and stressed about the future, and a sense of panic. And you maybe start to question yourself. You start to have self doubt. You lose hope. Then when you extract that out, then how do you treat other people? Well, you're probably a little shorter. You're probably not as kind. You're probably more resentful if someone is doing really well compared to you, because now you could see it on social media. And so it just has really profound consequences on human beings. And I've said before, and I really believe that I think the one thing that would improve everybody's quality of life is for every individual to feel more economically empowered. Like, how do we deliver that in the easiest way? And I do think that Bitcoin is the most accessible, easiest way to start to deliver that little by little, because it's a form of money that appreciates and grows in value when you zoom out. And so I hope that we can convince people to step outside of their bubbles and echo chambers, because a lot of the fights right now online, they seem to be about politics and social issues and the things that are, again, I feel like symptoms of the actual root problem, which is that our money is so corrupted and we can't save in our money. So the challenge for us is to try to get people to see the forest for the tree, like to get past all of that and say, whoa, we're all kind of fighting about the same thing, really. And the problem is we have to fix the money. Otherwise, none of these other problems could ever be solved.
Yeah. Yeah. There is like a lot of polemics, yes, where Bitcoin can be some kind of the substitute for the money that we have right now. There are lots of debates. We'll see how it ends up. For now, as Jeff Booth always says, we should not fight the actual system, the present system. We should try to build the other one, the parallel one, and once it's working and everyone realizes that it's better, it will just go naturally. We'll just flow to the on the other side. Yes.
Yes. Well, and it's true. And one thing that he says that's also correct is if you live on the Bitcoin standard, and I'm not talking about, okay, you have to now spend everything in Bitcoin, you're like living day to day on Satoshis. I'm just saying, like, if you have changed your mentality and you're operating your lens that you measure the world in is Bitcoin as opposed to fiat, everything is getting cheaper.
Yeah.
Everything is getting cheaper. My life has transformed ever since I got into Bitcoin. I used to be one of the most stressed out people when it came to, will I survive financially in the future? I was like, I was terrified of it. I had a good job, I had a stable salary, and I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to afford a house. And I don't know if I can ever afford to have a family. And I was like, if took an example of just, an average person in America, compare that to someone in the developing world, we're so fortunate. And yet all of us have become so stressed out. And now with Bitcoin, when I've learned all of this and I've empowered myself with the knowledge of how the system actually works, and I've started to accumulate this asset that grows in value more than pretty much anything, I now think, oh my gosh, first of all, let's get everyone on this life raft, because it really does feel like that. But now I'm not as worried about the future. I feel like I don't want to be one of the only ones on that life raft. Like I think that we need to teach people about it, because so many people are getting so frustrated that we're leading to a world of violence and chaos, because we're sowing the seeds of just total revolution and hatred toward one another. So, like, I think that Bitcoin is the only way that we build our way into a more peaceful, abundant world. We have to shift out of that. We have to teach people about it as quickly as possible, because the world that we're headed toward, and if there wasn't Bitcoin, it's not, it's like a dark one, I personally think. And with Bitcoin, it's like a huge ray of light saying that there is hope and there is a better path forward. And we as humans can cooperate and work together to build something amazing. It's not going to be perfect. There's still, human nature is human nature, but the incentives are realigned to reward goodness again. And that's what I think Bitcoin really does.
I sign with my both hands. I feel absolutely the same. I've been working. I'm still working in the bank, in the financial world, but the feeling of waking up every morning and thinking and worrying, okay, today I've got a job, but tomorrow I may not have it. And then what? So it's like, and I was always like trying to do triple or 10 times more, always trying to, always with this feeling, I'm late. I'm late to everything. It's too
Yeah.
late. I have to do more. I have to do more, but with no
Yeah.
guarantee. So
Yeah.
there is the time that you burn yourself out, and you don't see like the final reward somewhere there. It's like always getting like farther and farther and farther away, and it's so depressing. So
Yeah.
when I discovered Bitcoin, it's exactly what you say. I'm calm, And then I started to do this podcast. I said, okay, I just now can do whatever I want. I'm like calm. I can finally be myself, and this is all thanks to Bitcoin. And by the way, working within this ecosystem, getting to know all those wonderful people, all the wonderful community, it's amazing. It's discovering completely different world for me. It's like other universe, and
Yes.
and it's and it's so this is my reward. Meeting all those people, meeting you. uh,
Yes. This
yeah,
space is
yeah,
incredible. I mean, I am amazed at how many very interesting, very different people from fascinating industries, and they're experts in everything from engineering to computer science to finance to psychology to, I mean, I've met people from all different backgrounds and expertise, and they've come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is this hopeful tool of freedom for the future. And it's like, wow, we're so lucky to meet these folks.
yeah.
Truly. I mean, I feel like there are some interesting stories of people that got to watch the initial boom of the internet, right? Like working for some of these big companies, the people who were around when Google started or Microsoft or Apple. Like, I feel like those are fascinating stories, but Bitcoin takes the cake. I mean, Bitcoin's even more because it's going to impact more people than
Yeah.
some of these companies. And yeah, I just think it's an incredible group, and Bitcoin attracts some of the most brilliant minds in the world.
Talking about people, had recorded already how many? 300 podcasts? My God. I just
Yeah.
started, I've got like 30, and for me, it's like, wow, how
Happened
can you go
fast
to 30
though. I
more?
know. Before
Yeah.
you know it, you have over
Wow.
100, and it's amazing. It's so crazy that um and think about it, like the internet empowered us to do this because again, I come from a background of television where information and these stories of people, they were gate kept by the networks. Like if the networks or the newspapers covered it, then you would learn about it. But if they didn't, where would you hear the story, right? And so the internet opened the door to an incredible amount of information and video content and just stories from around the world, and people could kind of judge them for themselves. And so if you would have told me like 10, 15 years ago that I would be interviewing people and it would be my decision who to interview, my decision what questions to ask, and that it could be listened to by millions of people around the world, I would be like, I don't even, this isn't possible. And so, that's, I feel like we're at that starting point of Bitcoin where people can't envision how it's going to transform their lives, and they don't believe that it's going to matter. But it is. It really, really is, because what the internet did for information and for news and for some of these other industries, Bitcoin's going to do when it comes to financial aspects of our lives and the banking system. We've just only seen like, the crack of the door when it
Yeah.
comes to
Yeah.
what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You had so many different guests. If you could tell us, like, what was the conversation that most impacted you? That is like, if I could repeat it, or the one that most influenced you, or made you think, or change your opinion over whatever, related
Yeah.
not only to Bitcoin.
I mean, I've had so many great ones, and my most popular, people won't be surprised, but my most popular guests are Michael Saylor, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Whitney Webb, Lynn Alden. But I think my most favorite, the one that impacted me the most, was a recent interview I did about 10 months ago with Jeff Booth, which I highly recommend people listen to because I was doing the finishing touches on my book and I was reading back through it, and I just wanted to be really airtight on some of the lessons about inflation. And Jeff has this incredible way. I feel like he's talking to us from the future. It's like he's like come to us and explaining how things are going to work. And so what I did is I called him and I said, I want to ask some questions. Some of them are going to be completely like probably some very dumb questions, but I want to record it and use it for my book. And he said, sure. And I told him, like, maybe if it ends up being a conversation that I think would be valuable to others, maybe I'll release it as a podcast if that's okay with him. But I don't know. Maybe it'll be just totally out there and silly and like I won't. But so we ended up recording it. It was mind blowing, like truly. And that conversation, if I go to a Bitcoin event today, whether it's a small or big conference or meetup, there's always at least one person who comes up to me and goes, that interview you did with Jeff Booth blew my mind. Like it was life changing. And so that interview, I think, serves as just a marker in time for me of just if you want to better understand the broken system and why we have inflation and why we kind of need it in the current system, but why we can build something like you mentioned, we could build a parallel system that does not build itself on top of debasement of your currency and on inflation, then you need to listen to that interview because Jeff has a way of really explaining it in a very, very simple way. And so I used that as inspiration for some of the aspects of the book.
I listened to it when it was released, but now I'm going to listen to it once again.
Yeah. I've listened to it a couple times.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
well, and one thing, like, I don't know if you saw, there was an article that went viral recently from, his handle is at Professor Plum. I think his name is Michael Green, and he's a successful investor, and he talked about how the poverty benchmark, we have these benchmarks of, okay, if you're at poverty level in the United States, if your family income is XYZ, and the benchmark really has not shifted a lot because a lot of these metrics are based on 2% inflation, even though we know that we've had far more than 2% inflation. And that's one thing I explain in my book. And so he broke down this benchmark and said that this is no longer accurate and that actually $140,000 is now you're basically at the poverty level, which think about that. I mean, $140,000 salary, our median income in America is somewhere around like $80,000. So you have to almost double it and you're still at poverty level. Like that's wild to a lot of people. But he explained this and it went viral because a lot of people said, this is pretty accurate. If you look at the cost of rent or a mortgage and childcare and groceries and all the things you have to pay for, healthcare premiums, all that, he's kind of right. All of a sudden, your paycheck's just eaten away and you can't save money. But he went out and followed that up saying that he doesn't like Bitcoin because you need an elastic money supply. You need for the money supply to grow or the whole thing collapses. And that's the stuff I asked Jeff Booth about because people have this like idea that, oh my gosh, if we don't expand the system, if we don't print more money, if we don't have inflation, it's like we're going to live in the most destitute, horrible world. And it's not true. And it's not true. And like Jeff Booth, I think articulates it better than anyone. So if you've been someone who feels that way, who says inflation is necessary for society, or you've heard someone say that, listen to that interview and I guarantee your mind will be changed.
Yeah. I listened to the like hundreds of hours of when I started to go deeply into Bitcoin. I listened like thousands of hours of Michael Saylor with Robert Bridlow. This is like, all the
Yes.
time at my home. But it was like, okay, listen, we were listening to both with my husband. We put all in Bitcoin and I just left it there and I said, okay, we've got Bitcoin now. Now I'm happy. And I just kept on with my, fiat work, endless hours, not even the time to think about anything else. What we commented at the very beginning, the day-to-day life, it's like very hard. But I was convinced, but I was like, okay, my husband knows it a little bit better. I trust him. Let's just do it. But then was this book of Jeff Booth, The Price of Tomorrow, that when I read it, it was like, wow, that was my orange pill moment. And now when anyone asks me, okay, where should I start? I always say, start from price of tomorrow. Start of price of tomorrow. I'm economist. I graduated from the economy, from finance. I was a professor of
Wow.
microeconomics, finance. When I graduated, I went straight to the university. And I was teaching my students constantly, everything that we are talking now that we know that is like not true. We've got to have the inflation. There is this board of the central bank that they have those meetings each month. They decide the interest rate. It's completely normal. So when the demand is going up, then we have to like put more interest. Then when it's going down, it was like so normal and so accepted globally. When I think that all those other generations of students that came after keep on listening to the same thing, when now I'm talking to anyone and I'm saying, no, inflation is bad, deflation is good, they just looking at me like
Yeah.
I was crazy.
Yeah.
So
Right.
people don't understand that all this basic information that you're receiving at schools, at universities is just wrong. But of course, no one is, interested in teaching us what is the problem and why there is a problem, and no one wants us to know how the financial system really works, because if we start to be independent, then we don't need all those governments, we don't need those politics, and they just live out of it, of our in consciousness, of our ignorance. And that's why it's like education is so important. And as you said, as internet and Bitcoin, we luckily live in the world that all this access to the knowledge is more and more democratized, or how we can say it. Everyone has got the access. So there's like no more excuses. I'm always saying just sacrifice one series of Netflix or one
Yeah.
football match and just read a bit. And then you will see that, there are so many opportunities around you that you're not even aware of. So you're just going, complaining, and everything is wrong. But as Jeff Booth, it's like the basis. So I will listen to this podcast once again for sure. It's
Yeah.
like a
No, but
masterpiece.
I mean, his book is incredible, and I
Yeah.
don't think it even mentions Bitcoin, because I think at the time
No,
he
just
wrote it,
once. There's like one
yeah,
phrase that
yeah,
he
I
mentions
think
it
maybe one,
once.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it's really about our current system and deflation and technology, what technology is supposed to do. So I tried to pull some of that into my book, but also talk about Bitcoin, obviously. But I mean, it's so brilliant, and none of us question it. And it goes back again to incentives and how the whole system has been constructed, because I think as humans, one of the things I've realized that's really funny about us is if we study history and we hear about, a corrupt leader, ruler, or, we find out that there were lies that were told and there was corruption somewhere, and, something bad happened. Today, I feel like people don't want to believe it about happening right now. Like if you say academia is corrupt and the government is influencing it, and there's all these incentives, and the professors, are incentivized to teach one thing, and there are these journals, but they're the people financing the studies or whatever. You're like, no, like that can't be happening. That's absolutely not true. But if you say that, okay, that happened in the 1950s, people are like, oh, wow. Yeah, I believe that. Of course, I believe that. And so I think we have this almost recency bias, and we want to assume, I think a lot of people have a tough time because they want to assume that the government is this positive, benevolent force. And it's funny because it's like, it's filled with people who are ultimately corruptible and human and fallible and flawed. And when you pair that with a system of money where you could just print units out of thin air, and the people who are closest to that apparatus benefit tremendously, of course we're going to have a completely corrupted system. Like, obviously, we're going to have waste and fraud and corruption and manipulation and terrible things happening at all levels, because you can manipulate that system to someone's advantage, which is one of the reasons why I love Bitcoin so much, because I feel like everyone should be held to the same standards. And then, some people will excel and succeed, and some people are more motivated, and some people have unique talents, and some people may not do as well, but it will be a fair system where we can look at it and kind of evaluate it in a way that makes sense and is attached to reality and truth. As opposed to today, you see people who are successful, and like, understandably, someone would look at them and be like, I don't necessarily think they earned that. Or you see Congress members that go into office and they're worth $65,000, and then suddenly they're worth 30 million in buying mansions, and it's like, think you deserve that. My quality of life is worse, and you just enriched yourself by being in public office. Like, how does this work? Right. So I think the more that we align ourselves with a system that's really ultimately tied to truth, truth, like truth that you cannot break and manipulate. I think it will allow us to measure the world in a better way, in a more realistic way, and that's what Jeff Booth also kind of, I think, shines a spotlight on.
A last question, because we're talking a lot about Jeff Pope, but you were widely known about being, the very close also to Michael Saylor. You interviewed him many times. You many times mentioned in your interviews that you look up to him and you learned so much from him. When was this moment that you met for the first time, and what was that impressed you in him? I met him once, maybe two times. We saw each other. No, the man is amazing. This is my this is my guru. This is my
Yeah.
North Star. What was the moment that you first met and you started to do these interviews? And what was the thing that was most impressive for you?
That's It's an interesting question. So I first heard him in interviews, probably like you, right? And I was just starting my show and I hadn't publicized any interviews yet, but I decided to go to the Bitcoin conference. So I'm sure I heard all the series that he did, but he was very new to Bitcoin because he got in and he announced the company announced in August 2020, and the conference that I went to was Bitcoin 2021. So I was watching him, I was watching everyone in the space, and I thought he's someone that I want to get for this podcast that I'm going to debut. And so I got tickets for the conference, and I was there with my best friend who I love, Paula Penley. She's been on my show. She's now even working in the Bitcoin space, which is great. And I told her, my goal with this conference is I have to get these dream interviews that I have. I have to make sure to introduce myself and ask them to come on my podcast. Because sometimes what happened to me is I would reach out to people and they didn't respond. Maybe they got my message, maybe they didn't, but I couldn't reach them. So my goal at that conference was to meet Michael and Saifedean and a couple of the other big voices. So I'll never forget, I was backstage with Paula and I saw him, I spotted him. He was with his, security guards. And I just turned to her and I said, I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to just ask him if he'll come on my podcast. So I walked up to him. I was wearing a black shirt with a big Bitcoin symbol in the middle. If you guys remember my first podcast cover, I was with this big Bitcoin thing in the middle, which was just outrageous. So funny. And then I just walked up to him and I introduced myself and I said, I have this podcast. I would just love for you to consider coming on. I think you do such a great job sharing the message of Bitcoin. It was a fog because I was so nervous and I wanted to compliment him on the work that he's done. And lo and behold, it worked. And he came on my podcast for the first time a couple weeks later. But I think it was a transformation for me because at first when you meet Michael, you're just like, wow, that's a very successful, very intelligent person. And so you admire from afar the more materialistic things, right? Like the success, and clearly he's very brilliant, he's very intelligent. But when you get to know Michael, you see so much heart. This is a person who's driven by purpose and a mission of making the world a better place. He feels like he just believes that Bitcoin helps the everyday person as much as it helps those in his realm, which are the wealthiest of the wealthy. He's never seen a technology that benefits both classes of people so much that if you embrace it, that person wins. If that person embraces it, it's a win-win for really everybody. And I just really admire the amount of time and sacrifice that he gives. He doesn't have to, right? He's in a position where he could be laying on a beach and retired. And instead, he flies around the world on his time to share the message of Bitcoin. That's incredible to me. So I think what I admire is his passion and his purpose and how kind he is in doing it. Because one thing that you'll see is Michael never talks down to anyone. He never insults anyone. He doesn't engage with trolls online. There's nothing that's negative about what he puts out. All he puts out is Bitcoin is hope. Bitcoin is empowerment. Bitcoin is for everyone. So that's why I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to see you in Madrid. I hope you can make it. It will be such an honor to bring you here to Spain so that the Spanish audience get to know you better. And if not, well, next year for sure we're gonna meet in one of these conferences that we are like going from one to another.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been such a pleasure. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best with your show, and I hope to see you in person soon.
Thank you so much.